Welcome to Sleep Horrors, where the night opens its quiet, unsettling doors. I don't know why you hesitate here. Right at the edge of this haunting threshold, a place where long, whispering tales wait for you, each word crafted carefully by my own hands. Stay a little longer, because there are countless dark wonders I'm ready to reveal. Igor Kirillovich. The investigator set his glasses aside and fixed his gaze on his conversation partner. I invited you. He emphasized invited, seemingly to highlight the friendly nature of the talk. To inform you, the active search for your wife, Koshaleva Anna Nikolaevna, has been stopped. Igor Kirillovich gave a slight smirk. A blind boar, likely a brave husband, a big fan of beer and kebabs. There's no doubt about their connection. However, the investigator is growing overweight, spending all his time in a government chair. Igor is also 45 years old, yet when you compare him to this foolish and arrogant captain, he seems like a real lightweight. He's slim, trim, and always alert. It's not surprising that Solidaxio is still just a captain at his age. To be precise, he's a captain of justice. It would be far more beneficial if this boar-like captain actually appeared on the scene from time to time. It's good for the investigation, and it would shake the fat off. Friendly conversation, Igor Kirillovich mentally interjected. It's for the best, though. Not too much. You have succeeded in 5 years of searching. I understand your feelings and regret that I could not help you. The investigator stood up, signaling that the audience was over. The desk beneath him creaked pitifully. Please take the documents. With them, you must go to court so that your wife can be officially recognized as dead, and you can get a death certificate. At last, Igor Kirillovich let out a sigh of relief, and so as not to appear overly pleased, just in case, he inquired, "Could you please explain what it means to take active steps?" The thing is, your wife's details will be entered into the search database, and she will be searched for as long as necessary until she is found. However, you're well aware that the chances are, honestly, quite slim. About 1/1000%. It has been a considerable amount of time, and in this situation, it might just be a stroke of luck. What about the death certificate? Igor Kirillovich could not help but be wary and looked at the investigator with poorly concealed displeasure. I understand so many difficulties you have because of the uncertainty. Don't worry. Certificate you will certainly get. The statute of limitations has expired. Well, it starts from the date of the missing persons report. And if the person is not found within the time defined by law, then the search will be canceled. However, that doesn't imply that the search will be fully terminated. Yes, indeed, while special operational and search activities might not be actively conducted, the information indicating that the person was sought after will persist indefinitely, even if it's just in the archives. Should any leads emerge in the future, then immediately, even if the statute of limitations for the search has passed, all law enforcement agencies will be alerted that this missing person might be located. However, by doing so, he'd be assumed dead. Indeed. Recognizing someone as alive isn't uncommon in court, but I doubt this applies to you. I understand your perspective. Thanks for your hard work. Have a great day. Igor Kirillovich shook the investigator's firm yet slightly damp hand, took the documents, and walked to the exit. Hey, isn't that the man whose wife we've been searching for? He's getting into the car now. The young detective asked when investigator Valensky stepped outside for a smoke. I recall when I went to the site, he was wringing his hands and sobbing. The comedy drama theater, seriously. Valensky nodded. Is the case over, finished? Probably this arrogant fop still pretends to be the inconsolable husband. Yes. Valensky sighed with thoughtfulness. although it seems to me that he is not a victim, but the very murderer. And what's a shame is that he's made such a mess of the case, that there's not a single clue, not a tiny piece of evidence, nothing to dig up. And yet there's nothing secret that can't be revealed. Igor Kirillovich turned off on the avenue and, trying to drive the car as carefully as possible, how not to take care of such a beauty, headed for home. The visit to the investigator left a double feeling. On the one hand, a certain mixture of yearliness and irritation, and on the other hand, unprecedented relief mixed with triumph. However, the 5 years filled with fear and apprehension have finally come to an end. Now he has the opportunity to truly make a change. His wife Anna had always been a dull, boring, and frail person who only ever caused him irritation. Nonetheless, the inheritance she left behind was quite substantial, and he is confident that he will be able to manage it wisely. Anka had a decent bank account, a cottage, a car, and 2 apartments. The first one, though, was rather shabby. A Brezhnevka with a good layout, but on the city's outskirts. It's in such a location that it's tough to get there, even by car, let alone by public transport. But the second is a real Tsarist palace. Huge old apartments in the city center, next to a large park. And it is almost impossible to keep the heirs away. Her daughter from her first marriage, the same frail and sickly Lisa, to stick her own legitimate father. It's a good thing he didn't give up his rights to the child. And the fact that the birth father is a complete alcoholic, the matter is absolutely tenth. Igor Kirillovich is absolutely not interested. And to get rid of the old grandmother Fedosia is a simple matter. It's not a grandmother at all. An old witch, some distant relative. The 7th water on the vine. She had no inheritance rights. Move her to Brezhnevka and let her be happy that she got at least something. But an apartment in the center of the city, it's a different conversation. Igor Kirillovich mentally returned to the problem of housing. Even at the very beginning of their relationship, Anka said that the whole house used to belong to their family. It turns out that this dead chicken came either from impoverished nobles or from rich merchants, and the house was built by her eldest relative. As usual during the revolution, the house was taken over by the Soviet authorities, and the family was left a part of the apartment on the top floor. Then the rooms were rebuilt many times, partitions were put up, doors were changed, and only in the 98 years, Anka managed to buy the whole apartment. Igor Kirillovich didn't even want to think about the money Anka had invested in major repairs. Now it was 3 rooms with high ceilings and stucco, a real working fireplace, a spacious kitchen, and the main bathroom. Strangely, it was the bathroom that brought Igor Kirillovich a sense of exaltation. Perhaps because the room had a narrow lancet window. The tank was real, ancient, on strong cast iron legs, deep and spacious enough to drown in. Bathing in such a tub suited a man who was very smart and athletic, like Igor Kirillovich, who took great care of his body and health. He was a strong advocate for cleanliness, insisting that Anka maintain the bathroom in perfect order, paying extra attention to every detail. Initially, Igor Kirillovich didn't immediately think of parting with Anka. He felt some affection for her fragility and timeless nature. However, Anka's frequent illnesses, her dislike for company, and her indifferent attitude towards her home, lacking respect, became an issue. For Igor Kirillovich, who spent much of his life with his parents in a communal apartment, this was akin to sacrilege, a criminal devaluation. Before long, Anna started to really get on his nerves. She believed that pursuing high-quality housing was a sign of being cheap bourgeoisie, and she was clearly hinting at Igor Kirillovich's low and crude bourgeoisie status. There were moments when he despised her arrogance so intensely that he felt an urge to kill her, right there, in front of their relatives and guests. Despite this, Anka's fate was already determined, and Igor Kirillovich was just waiting for the perfect opportunity. That moment, the day was extremely hot, sticky and oppressively heavy. By the evening, a thunderstorm was brewing, and throughout the day, it steamed relentlessly, causing the townspeople to endure excessive sweating and the exhausting heat. Igor Kirillovich got home at 8 o'clock. For summer, it should have still been light outside, but suddenly the sky darkened, began to water, and was overhung with a dense, heavy canopy. It was already rumbling, and as soon as he stepped into the entrance, a sharp wind picked up in the courtyard. All of a sudden, it turned dark. On the stairs, Igor Kirillovich encountered Grandma Fedosia and Lizka. They were heading to the dacha. The elderly woman cast an unfriendly glance at Igor Kirillovich and firmly declined the offer to drive them to the station by car. It must be noted that for some reason, Igor Kirillovich had a fear of the old woman named Fedosia. She appeared to be just a typical city pensioner who spent her days lingering around drugstores and various stores, shuffling along in her broken shoes, which were long out of fashion, and waving belligerently at the worn-out packages from the social store. However, there was something unsettling in her eyes. Her small brown eyes were set so deeply that at times Igor Kirillovich thought the old woman seemed to have no eyes at all. It was only upon closer inspection that he sensed two dark, intense muzzles targeting him from beneath her furrowed brows. Lizka said that her mother had called a cab for them, and their favorite relatives had left for the dacha to the accompaniment of a thunderstorm. The apartment felt stuffy, even with the air conditioner on. Igor Kirillovich drank a glass of cold mineral water, set the split system to maximum cooling, and noted with displeasure that Anka didn't come out to greet him. She was in the bathroom, even though she could have done that earlier, long before he arrived. "Anyuta, will you be out soon?" Igor Kirillovich struggled to keep his irritation in check. He felt hot. Her shirt was clinging tightly to her back, and she really wanted to take a shower. Or even better, to lie completely in the bathtub and spend a whole hour soaking in the gentle foam. "Yes, help me now. I'm not feeling well today. It's so unbearably hot." Anna had a weak heart, and doctors even discussed the possibility of a pacemaker, so she never locked the bathroom door. Igor Kirillovich tapped his knuckles carelessly on the molding just to be sure, and then entered the bathroom. Anka lay entirely in the bathtub, which she typically did not do, as she preferred to settle for a quick and light shower. This habit of hers irritated Igor Kirillovich immensely. He was of the opinion that such minimal bathing did not effectively remove all the dirt, and he believed only a long, full bath could truly cleanse a person. The bathroom, although quite spacious, felt damp and stuffy. Anna chose not to open the window, yet even through the ventilation pipe, she could distinctly hear the rain roaring outside, cascading down the gutters with loud torrents of water. The storm was fiercely raging. Igor Kirillovich suddenly felt a wave of apprehension at the thought that Granny and Lizka might indeed come back. He couldn't quite grasp why this thought had entered his mind. For several long minutes, he gazed thoughtfully at his wife. Anka merely offered a silent smile, seemingly interpreting his look as a signal for future intimacy. Lately, intimacy had been occurring between them less frequently. Igor Kirillovich was utterly exhausted by even the scent of his wife, and her rushed and careless water routines evoked a clear sense of squeamishness in him. Furthermore, Anka did not possess a luxurious figure. Despite her slender build, she had relatively short legs and an elongated, long torso, much like a log. A log? Yes, it is a log, Igor Kirillovich thought with some distaste as he leaned over to give his wife a kiss. Anka awkwardly pecked him on the cheek with her damp nose and explained in a pitiful manner, "I decided to lie down in the bath. And now I'm feeling dizzy when standing. I'm feeling completely off." "You look very pale." Igor Kirillovich eventually gave in and almost instinctively placed his palm on her throat. He did this as if he were in a dreamlike state. It was some sort of strangely calibrated movement, almost as if it wasn't his first time doing it. It was a peculiar gesture, as if he was trying to feel the pulse of the nasal artery. Anna's throat felt weak, thinly. There was a streppishly beating vein, and Igor Kirillovich could wrap one arm around her neck, which he proceeded to do, while simultaneously squeezing the crisp laryngeal cartilages and pressing her head into one tub. Anka wheezed as she convulsively pounded her arms and legs, desperately trying to free herself from the suffocating grip, splashing water everywhere. Several dreadful minutes slowly passed by. Anna continued thrashing about, much like a fish that's been caught. Surprisingly strong, she kept fluttering and fluttering, attempting to grasp the edge of the bathtub along with Igor Kirillovich's hands. Then, quite unexpectedly, it became silent and went completely limp. Igor Kirillovich was drenched, soaked from head to toe, yet he persisted in keeping Anka's head submerged under the water, even though she showed no further signs of life. Last, he slowly unclenched his cramped fingers. Anna was no longer alive. Her lifeless body lay beneath a thin layer of foamy water. Her hair floated gently like seaweed. Her eyes remained open. Igor Kirillovich sat quietly on the edge of the bathtub. The apartment felt eerily quiet. It seemed as if all sounds had vanished. He could hear neither the hum of the air conditioner, nor the rumble of the water streams cascading onto the roof, nor the faint clicks of the soapy foam scattered on the floor. There was an eerie silence all around, causing goosebumps on her back, and her arms were covered with goose flesh. Anka suddenly sighed, and Igor Kirillovich, who was still on the edge of the tub, nearly fell into the water with the floating corpse. But it was just the last echo of life. A large, unexpectedly cheerful soap bubble suddenly emerged from Anka's nose. It inflated mockingly, popped loudly, and burst. Following him, a thin trickle of blood came out of his nose and dissolved in the water. Something had to be done about the corpse. Igor Kirillovich came out of the bathroom. He was nauseous and dizzy. His ears were still filled with Anka's wheezing and the sounds of slapping water. He made his way to the kitchen, leaving paths of water behind him, pulled back the curtain, and stared out the window. The rain was slamming down with the same force as before, and was probably threatening to linger all night. The idea of taking the corpse to the forest came to Igor Kirillovich somehow automatically. Fortunately, the downpour had driven everyone under the roof, and he had little fear of running into dangerous witnesses. Igor Kirillovich decided to use his neighbor's car for his plan. He rarely drove his old Skoda, and the windows of his home faced away from the neighbor's side of the house. All that remained was to lower the corpse down the stairs. At first, Igor Kirillovich wanted to act out a scene, as if he were transporting his unconscious wife to the hospital. But then he changed his mind. It was too risky to run into the neighbors and become suspect number one. Fortunately, the house still had a back staircase, and he looked around the kitchen for the door. The scoundrels among the workmen had been quite careless and sloppy in their work. At another time, this might well have been the subject of a serious dispute with the construction company. However, at this moment, Igor Kirillovich was actually somewhat pleased with this outcome. The door was cleverly concealed behind a dark pink plastic panel, and he found that he had no difficulty in pulling out the old, corroded nails. As soon as the crooked door swung open, a grave, gray chill hit Igor Kirillovich. The staircase was completely dark and led downward, intimidating with its impenetrable blackness. He managed to pull Anka's body out of the water without much difficulty. Luckily, she was quite light. He retrieved the largest blanket from the closet, wrapped her body, and gently lowered it onto the stairs. Igor Kirillovich walked very slowly, carefully trying to feel the crumbly steps with his foot. The stairs were both smelly and slippery, as they had never been cleaned, and at any moment he might fall down with the weight he carried. His heart was racing wildly, he was sweating, and his wife, who hadn't felt especially heavy before, now seemed like an immovable stone. Rigor mortis had likely set in, and Igor Kirillovich was soaked with sweat at every step. It took a long time to descend this way, almost by touch. It was completely dark on the stairs, and Igor Kirillovich relied entirely on his instincts to navigate. Each time he cautiously tested the next step with his foot before moving forward. He discovered he reached the front door only after a full half an hour had passed. Luckily, the street door was unlocked. Sometimes janitors use this way to store inventory. Igor Kirillovich went into the yard without any issues. He was fortunate. The rain was pouring just as hard as before. Even if he tried, nothing could be seen through the downpour. Initially, Igor Kirillovich thought of waiting until late night, but the rain might stop, so he decided to act immediately. The neighbor's car needed to be moved to the back door manually. Completely soaked, just like after a shower. What a farce. Igor Kirillovich maneuvered the car into position, placed his wife's body into the trunk, and only then did he decide to start driving. For several minutes, he was drenched in cold sweat, anxiously waiting for the engine to roar to life, and thankfully, the old Skoda didn't disappoint him. The engine purred like a satisfied beast, and Igor Kirillovich proceeded at the slowest possible speed towards the intended arch. He barely remembered the route to the correct place. The rain was pouring down heavily, and Igor Kirillovich was trying his best to drive as cautiously as he could manage. He was very keen on avoiding any accidents or encounters with the police. Initially, his plan was to take the corpse of his wife as far away as possible, but then he reconsidered and remembered an intriguing spot that Anna had once shown him. This particular swamp was located in the direction of their summer house. There was a day when he had gone camping with his wife, and it was an activity he utterly despised. Igor Kirillovich had a strong preference for the ruggedness of camping in a tent over the comfort of waking up on a soft bed, enjoying a regular trip to the toilet, and, most importantly, a spacious, clean bathroom. He detested this kind of leisure with all his heart, and only agreed to Anka's satisfaction after lengthy and tiring persuasions. Not too far from the swamp, there was a fairly decent dirt road. Even now, Igor Kirillovich did not fear the possibility of getting stuck on it. The swamp was truly beautiful, lushly overgrown with cattails and lilies. It was well hidden between the trees, and according to Anka, it was both dangerous and deep. Now you'll have plenty of time to explore its danger and depth, thought Igor Kirillovich, as he turned onto an inconspicuous road that he had almost missed in the dark. It took quite a long time to finally get to the right place. Igor hadn't visited here in a long time and oriented himself by the two huge boulders marking where the swamp began. Eventually, he had no choice but to get out of the car and proceed on foot, using a small pocket flashlight he discovered in the glove compartment to light his path. The rain eventually ceased, and Igor Kirillovich, with a noticeable shudder, proceeded slowly along the muddy road. He was enveloped by dampness and pitch-black darkness. The beam from the lantern seemed to be literally swallowed by the impenetrable gloom. A thick, inky darkness surrounded him from every direction, compelling him to continuously look around. Igor Kirillovich had the feeling that behind every bush and every tree, mysterious and formless figures were hiding. These figures seemed to be trying to stay behind him at all times. He felt a chill and a sense of unease. In the distance, he could hear a night bird's eerie laughter. The wet tree crowns were rustling in the breeze. Oddly, He couldn't hear any sounds of civilization, even though the navigator indicated that a railroad was nearby. It seemed as though he had found himself in a kind of ancient and wild forest, one that was inhabited by evil and strange, incomprehensible creatures. The road continued to stretch forward, and Igor Kirillovich had left the car at quite a distance, yet the swamp did not appear. Finally, with annoyance, he spat and made the decision to go back to the car. At that very moment, somewhere within the forest, a face suddenly flashed between the trees. Igor Kirillovich flinched and gripped the flashlight more tightly. It wasn't exactly a godsend, but it was at least some sort of weapon. Igor Kirillovich was absolutely certain that it was someone's face, even though he had only seen it for a brief moment. There was no question in his mind. It was a very pale, stern face with a harsh, dull expression. It felt as though it had been silently trailing Igor Kirillovich all along, closely examining him. It was just a singular face, lacking a body or even a head. It appeared as a flat surface with narrow eyes. It was just like Fedosi's grandmother. Igor Kirillovich was suddenly covered with goosebumps, feeling an icy chill spreading from within. No, it can't possibly be. Grandmother Fedosia? A foolish and superstitious old woman, always with her endless vegetables and bundles. How could she be wandering in the woods on such a wild night? And why was Igor Kirillovich following her? He felt so uneasy that the hair on his head seemed to stir. He quickly turned off the flashlight and pointed it toward the trees, hoping to confirm that he had only imagined it. Thick pines and spruces formed a gray, lifeless wall, diligently absorbing the light from the lantern. Igor Kirillovich was already relieved, thinking he had truly imagined it, when the strange face appeared once more. This time it was much farther away, nestled between the dense formation of trees, shining with an improbable whiteness and glaring at Igor Kirillovich with a dead, malicious stare. He, forgetting himself entirely, dashed back to the car, and as he felt his arms and legs weakening, hurriedly jumped behind the wheel. The trembling subsided a bit as he drove a kilometer away from the cursed area. Igor Kirillovich was already cursing the entire situation. He stepped out of the car, still overwhelmed by a wild and panicky terror. All common sense pointed to one conclusion, that it was all in his imagination. He was exhausted and overly anxious. There were no strange faces without bodies or heads in the woods, nor could there be any. Yet he was trembling, and a wave of cold, prickly goosebumps swept up and down his body. However, he simply couldn't return with his wife's body in the trunk, so he stubbornly continued to walk forward on the wet road, sensing that the damp and slippery roadbed seemed to lead nowhere. Igor Kirillovich suddenly stumbled upon the swamp quite unexpectedly. It appeared as though the forest abruptly parted, revealing a vast space covered with numerous convex bumps in front of him. The swamp was separated from the road by two enormous boulders, or perhaps even more likely, pieces of ancient weathered rocks. Igor Kirillovich smelled warm, stagnant water and silt. He sighed in relief. Anya's body finally became rigid, and with considerable effort, he managed to pull his wife out of the trunk. Igor Kirillovich was worried that he might not be able to throw the corpse far enough for it to sink underwater, but fortune was on his side. The man had tied 2 bricks to Anna's feet, which he had thoughtfully picked up along the road. With great difficulty, he climbed onto the slippery boulder and, with all the strength he could muster, hurled the body into the water. Instantly, warm and foul-smelling vapors rose from the thick slurry. There was an incredibly loud quacking sound that echoed through the air. For a while, Anna's body just lay there on the surface, as if it didn't want to sink at all. Igor Kirillovich, drenched in cold sweat, stood frozen in place. A blood-chilling silence enveloped everything around. It seemed as though even the bushes and trees had ceased their movement. Eventually, the water gurgled loudly, releasing swamp gases up to the surface. something moved along Anka's body, and she began to slowly sink into the thick swamp mush. It felt as though it had been happening for an eternity. The body was sinking slowly, almost as if it was doing so reluctantly. First, the legs disappeared into the mire, followed by the stomach and chest, leaving only the face on the surface. Gazing up at the sky with cloudy open eyes, this look made Igor Kirillovich feel uncomfortable once more. And without waiting for the body to disappear completely under the water, he quickly rushed to the car. He closed the door, turned on the heater because he was feeling terribly cold and chilled, and then turned back. Finally, his wife's body sank down, yet he noticed once more, among the trees, the cursed face of grandmother Fedosius. She was observing everything that was happening. Igor Kirillovich returned home feeling absolutely wonderful, joyfully waving the documents in his hand. Even the old woman Fedosia, whom he encountered on the stairs, couldn't dampen his wonderful mood. Throughout the years they had lived side by side, she had never uttered a single bad word or reproach against Igor Kirillovich. It's worth mentioning that they didn't converse much at all, and he made an effort not to recall that strange, chilling face he had once seen in the forest. "From the police?" the old woman asked with indifference when they happened to meet each other on the landing. "Did you manage to get the papers?" "Indeed, from the police," confirmed Igor Kirillovich, almost leaping with joy and trying not to make eye contact with the woman. "I did get them." "Well then, the time has truly come," still indifferently stated Fedosia, and began to descend the stairs slowly. Igor Kirillovich paid no attention to the grandmother's words, but simply entered the apartment and, rubbing his hands together with happiness, went into his briefcase to retrieve some papers. It was quite stuffy at home. The old woman really didn't like using air conditioning at all, and Igor Kirillovich made an effort not to argue with her about it. To hell with the grandmother, he thought. Soon he would live exactly as he saw fit. Right now he planned to take a bath, have a snack, and then lie down on the sofa to carefully scrutinize the investigator's note. "It's really weird. The air in the apartment feels kind of stale. Not good at all. Like it has a smell of rotten meat or a musty swamp. Probably a little grebe threw something spoiled into the bag, and the old fool forgot to take the garbage bag out to the dumpster. What an awful stench." Igor Kirillovich glanced into the kitchen, pulled the window frame open, and then opened the door to the bathroom. "Oh my God, what is happening here? What is all of this?" His beautiful white bathroom, with its narrow frosted window and delicate tiles, was now covered in some strange brown patina. It was brown and slimy, emitting a very peculiar and unpleasant odor, like a rotten swamp. However, the only thing that was worse was that inside the large snow-white bathtub, which had strong lion's paws, there was thick swamp water. It had a hint of green and cassava, and it was rippling gently. Sour water was filled with numerous gas bubbles. Amidst all this abomination, his wife Anna's body lay perfectly still. She appeared to have floated up from the swamp on her own, as if she had risen from the very bottom, along with the bricks. But where had she gone? It wasn't in the place where he had drowned her, but instead, she surfaced in a city apartment, within the large bathtub of a city apartment. Igor Kirillovich stood at the bathroom threshold, unable to move a muscle, staring stupidly at his wife's body. I must confess, it's remarkably well preserved, absolutely undecomposed. Even the eyes remained intact, gazing up at the ceiling with that recognizable cloudy stare. Igor Kirillovich sensed that a wild, panicked scream was about to erupt from his chest. Suddenly, a piercing bell rang out in the corridor. Then there was a sound of the key rattling, and Grandmother Fedosia began to speak. "Come in, he's at home now. Where else could he be? I just saw him on the stairs a moment ago. Hello once more, Igor Kirillovich, said investigator Valensky. I am sorry for bothering you. I know it's been quite some time, but back then you didn't let me inspect your apartment thoroughly. The investigation has been reopened now. Please, here is the prosecutor's authorization. Guards, you may enter the apartment.